In this lesson, we'll take a look at the API call responsible for creating sites. But before we dive into that, let's first go over how we actually create sites in Duda. Your client will be able to browse through a list of available templates and choose one to base their site on. As we learned in the previous lesson, each template has a unique ID. When a client selects a template, its ID gets stored in the backend, allowing it to be referenced and used when the client chooses a template to base their site on. The client is then able to give their site a name, which helps personalize and identify the site within their account. Once this is done, they'll have a site ready to start customizing to fit their needs. Let's now look at the API documentation to learn how to automate the site creation process. The site object is a reference to the data that makes up a site's structure and content stored in JSON format. You'll notice in the site object that it contains both data for the site's front end and some metadata that's intended for internal use or system purposes. Each site object will also store the template ID that was used to create the site. And when you're creating a site using the API, which we'll look at in just one moment, you'll have the option to send either all this data over or just some of it. Now, let's take a look at the API call we need to use to create a site. This call will create a site from a template, and the only required piece of data that we need to send over in the body is the template ID. And as we saw in the site object, you also have the option to pass through all this additional data that can be used on the site, including the site's domain. Now that we're acquainted with the API call, let's test it out in Postman. The create site call is a post request, which means we're sending data to the server to create a new site, specifically the template ID and the site's name. Let's copy the endpoint, and before we head back over to Postman, let's take a look at the flow we're automating with this call. As a reminder, a client will choose a template that they want to base their site on from a template chooser. This will store the template ID in the backend, which the API call will then use to generate the site. In this example, we'll work with a template called luxury car rental. Let's now head on over to Postman. Up on the screen, I still have the response from the last call we made in the previous lesson. Using Postman's search feature, I was able to find the template object for the luxury car rental template. Just a reminder, the most important piece of data we need for the Create Site API call is the template ID. Let's copy the ID, as we will be passing it in the Create Site API call that we'll be running shortly. From our collection, click on the three dots to add a new request. Let's give this request a clear and easily recognizable name. This is a post request, so we'll need to select Post from the dropdown. Then, let's paste in the endpoint. Since we're sending over data in this request, click the Body tab. From the dropdown, you can select the request body type you need to send your data in. Since we're sending over a JSON payload, we'll need to select Raw. The default is already set to JSON, but if you needed to send your request in a different format, you can set that up here. Now let's add in our payload. For this, I'm going to use Duda's API documentation to help me set up the JSON body. Under Language, click on the three dots to select JSON. This will help me format the body request, so all I have to do is fill in the fields in this API doc, and then just copy the JSON object provided in the playground. I need to send over the template ID of the template we're going to use, along with the name of the site. The name is optional, but having one will make it easier to identify the site in your Duda dashboard. Plus, it will be used to create a subdomain for the site. This is the request body we will send out. Go ahead and copy it, then head back over to Postman. Let's paste in our payload, and before we send over the request, let's take a look at the site list to see what we currently have. If you remember from the start of the video, we created a site called My First Site using the luxury car rental template, and we can see it in the site list. Let's hop on back over to Postman to send our request. A successful request will return a 200 status code along with some JSON. This here is the site's unique identifier, referred to as site name, site ID, and site alias. Let's copy that alias so we can look it up in our Duda dashboard. When I refresh the site list, we should see that site that was just created using the API. You'll also notice that any site created this way will have the API label automatically added, so you can easily identify it as being created through the API in your Duda dashboard. Let's now look up the site using the site alias that was returned in the call. We currently only have 2 sites in the account, but this becomes helpful later down the line when you have hundreds of sites to manage. Lastly, let's check out the site by clicking into the editor. And there we have it, our first site generated using the API. By automating the site creation process with just a template ID, you streamline creating sites at scale, save valuable time, and effortlessly manage multiple sites with maximum efficiency.